The Tennis Gambling Podcast and the Sports Gambling Podcast Network is brought to you by Nick Fantasy. Sign up with the pro code SGPN to get a 50% bonus up to $1,000. We're also about Rhythm, leader in data-driven picks and props. Get a 70 for today, booking two sports games columns, RITHMM. And welcome, everybody, to the Tennis Gambling Podcast here on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network. It's currently Wednesday afternoon, roughly 1:40 p.m. Eastern Time on January 22nd. I'm Rosso Scott Reichel, once again going solo for this pod. It is officially episode 2 of Wednesday. We already did the women's semifinal episode a couple hours ago. So you have my thoughts on the WTA semis, then check out the episode for this one. However, for this episode, going to go into the men's actual semifinal matchups taking place over the next day or so. So we're going to preview the matchups between Djokovic and Zverev and the matchup between Sinner and Shelton. So once again, before we get into that, though, do want to recap what happened in the last episode, both for the lock and dog picks and for the actual quarterfinals. Starting off with the lock and dog picks. Overall, a great episode for us. We got basically everything right. Starting off with the actual lock, ended up having a nice winner with Shelton and Sonego over 40.5 games, minus 121 on Bet Rivers. Now, the line closed at like 42.5 or so. Didn't matter. It flew over as you had a 4-set marathon. So overall, nice win there for the lock. Needed Sonego, though, to win the third set for losing the first two. And he came through as he eventually got the break to win the third set. And then eventually he did end up losing in the fourth set tiebreak, but not a problem. Nice win there for the lock. For the dog, really never in doubt. Had the over 3.5 set parlay, which has been really good to us so far in the event. Ended up having Alcaraz to go over 3.5 sets and Zverev to go over 3.5 sets. And that paid out a plus 133 on FanDuel. Never in doubt, Alcaraz and Joker split the first two sets. Zverev was a bit of a sweat because Paul should have won arguably each of the first two sets, choked them, but then ended up winning the third set comfortably. So either way, turned out to be no harm, no foul. Nice win there for both the lock and dog picks. So overall, it's been a great start to the year for us. Been a great tournament for us on the men's and women's side. Hopefully we'll keep it rolling here in the semis for this one. Now, before we get into any of the recap, though, for the quarters as a whole, want to remind you once again, you can show support for the show by showing some like and subscribing to the podcast on YouTube. I remind you can also leave a rating and a review on Spotify or Apple. If you want to listen to the edited version of the podcast, audio only afterwards. So once again, I do all the editing myself. If you want to check that out on Spotify or Apple, you can. And you can also leave a rating and a review. Either way, though, we finally crossed 700 subscribers. We've been crushing it on the show. Hopefully, you've been enjoying the free winners. The keyword there is free. A reminder, a lot of really bad tennis cappers on the internet charging for picks. I'm not one of them. Because one, I'm winning, and two, I don't charge anything. So if you want to show support and help the show grow, don't forget to like, subscribe. Don't forget to tell other people about the podcast, and don't forget, once again, to hopefully continue enjoying the content. Plus, a reminder, check out the merch store, SGPN website. We have a lot of great Tennis Camp Podcast merch. Actually, wearing the shirt right now. So you want to get this shirt. We have different colors as well. Also have, once again, some sweatshirts, some mugs, all affordable. So recommend getting yourself something on the merch store, not just for this show, but most shows, if not all the shows in the network, do have merchandise. My other shows are the NBA show, the MLB show, also WNBA, which is in the middle of the offseason, of course, but I do have a couple of other podcasts on the network, and they all have merch, so don't forget to check out those podcasts as well. Plus, a reminder, there's actually a great deal going on the merch store in honor of the big game, because in honor of the big game, from now until February 9th, 15% off everything in the SGPN merch store with the promo code Big Game. So once again, if you want to check out the merchandise and get a discount, don't forget to use the promo code Big Game at checkout on the SGPN merch store until February 9th. Anyway, time to get into the actual recap of the quarters. So overall, I'd say that there's a decent blend of competitive matchups and blowouts. So overall, you ended up having one match end in straight sets. The other three ended up going to 4. So overall, a pretty good blend. You had no 5-set thrillers, but a couple of really competitive 4-set matches. Starting off with the first match, you had Zverev against Paul, where Paul somehow lost the first 2 sets because Paul was definitely in control of a pretty decent portion of the match. He was serving for the actual set in the first set as he broke into the 5-5 game, had a set point, blew it. Zverev broke him back, and then Zverev ended up winning 7-1 in the first set tiebreak. Second set, Paul was up 5-2. Only one break, though, but still was serving for the set. Ended up getting broken to love, then had a set point in the actual 4-5 return game where Zverev was serving. Did not convert. Paul ended up holding, Zverev held, and then eventually Paul got bageled in the breaker. So Paul was serving for the set twice. Once again, first set and second set, blew it both times. Then you figure, all right, Paul might be screwed here. Maybe we're going to lose our over 3.5 set play because Paul is a choker. Then he came through as he dominated the third set, won it 6-2. So we ended up cashing that. Then he got buried there in the fourth set, 6-1. Could have ended up being 6-0. He had a crazy passing shot winner down match point, actually, but then eventually did lose 6-1 in the final set. So the real takeaway here from this matchup, Zverev looked fine. To be honest, Paul kind of handed it to him on a platter. It really felt like Paul should have been up 2-0, and it felt like Paul was the better player for, I'd say, the majority of the first and second sets. In fact, Zverev even admitted that in the post-match interview on court, where he basically said Paul was outplaying him, and he was able to find a way to win the first two sets. Code word, my opponent choked, but he didn't want to say that publicly. Point is, it's a classic Paul loss where he loses in heartbreaking fashion. Could have gotten the job done, and instead he ended up falling on his face. It's a pretty common Paul, I'd say, exit from a Grand Slam, where the match is starting to go in his favor, then he implodes in some big spots and eventually loses in painful fashion. It's the Tommy Paul experience. Having said that, welcome to the top 10 rankings, Tommy Paul. As for Zverev, it's really weird to fully evaluate that matchup because on one hand, he showed a lot of courage and a lot of guts by overcoming some obstacles to actually win the first two sets. On the other hand, we know that Zverev is also a pretty historical choker in semis and finals of Grand Slams. And him starting to show some signs of timidness in some of the rallies against Paul is definitely not what you want to see if you're picking Zverev to finally get over the hump and to beat the likes of Djokovic and maybe Sinner in the final. So the point is, Zverev, I thought, played fine, but there were some worrying signs, some signs of him getting passive again in big spots, and it worked out for him in this matchup because Paul's a bigger choker than he is. But I feel like you wanted to see Zverev look a little bit more confident in that type of matchup, and he really wasn't. And I feel like even though he ended up winning in 4, it was not, I'd say, the most optimistic I felt about Zverev's chances. And I feel like Zverev, even though he won, still showed once again some concerning red flags that we've seen in the past that might not bite him against Paul, but might bite him against Djokovic in the semis. So that's kind of my thoughts on Zverev. Thought he was fine. I kind of wanted to see a bit more out of him, to be honest, but Paul was in good form, I guess, entering the match, and eventually Paul did choke as Zverev did win in 4. See some people jumping in, by the way. Don't forget to shout out in the comment section, live on YouTube if you are listening to the podcast. Also, I believe simulcasting on the SGPN Twitter account. So if you are checking it out, you can leave a comment and I will read it. Greg, thank you for stopping by. Hopefully you end up enjoying the podcast in the future as well. I'm approaching national treasure status. That's a problem, Greg. I'm going for international treasure status. I'm trying to break the barrier there. Got my passport ready to try to break it into international treasure status. Might have to wait, though, maybe for a couple more winners for me to get into that status update. Either way, though, Ian stopping by again. I feel like you're stopping by in every show. Thank you for the constant support, Ian. So anyways, Zverev got the job done there in a pretty fun 4-set match. Moving on to the other matches, you had a couple of absolute wars. Joker and Alcaraz, I'll get to in a second. I'll save that as the last match I break down. Shelton and Sonego. We had the over for the games that got there. Very fun match. Very, very, I'd say, competitive battle. Took about 4 hours. It was the exact script I thought we would get. Now, I thought we'd end up getting more than one tiebreak, but Shelton's tiebreak streak continues, as the 4-set did go to a breaker. Point is, though, both guys were solid. Both guys held. Sonego was able to bump up the first serve percentage a bit in the 3rd set, and that was what he needed to actually win the set to help us win the over. He also might be the best trick shot maker on the entire tour. Sonego, in this entire tournament, has had an all-time great run in trick shots. He's had a couple of trick shots in every single round. He had the Fonseca over-the-shoulder, backwards running shot, the crazy behind-the-back shot against Wawrinka for a winner on break point. He had a couple yesterday, or I should say this morning. He had the diving volley down break point, which he lunged for complete dive, and it bounced and then bounced over to his own side, which is an all-time shot. Then he had the same shot against Fonseca against Shelton, the over-the-shoulder hit when he was running backwards for a winner. So he had 2 all-time great shots in one match, and unfortunately he lost anyway. But Sonego's trick shot catalog is very, very impressive, and I feel like the highlight reel is definitely underrated for his career. But Sonego played well. Shelton was a bit too solid, though, on some big points, and eventually, though, he did win roughly a 4-hour marathon. Props to Shelton, though, who's definitely improved the rally tolerance. I know that can be an issue at times, but Shelton in Grand Slams is very difficult to actually beat in 3 out of 5, and it sounds pretty crazy because Fritz is a top 5 player in the world. As an American, if you were asking me right now which player I think is more likely to win a Grand Slam, I know Fritz ended up making a Grand Slam final. I think my answer might be Shelton, actually. I think if you're asking me which American has the best chance to break the erotic curse of 03, of who's going to be the next American to win a Grand Slam title, I think I would pick Shelton over Fritz. I think Shelton has a certain gear he might not have actually reached yet because he's still very young. Fritz, I think this might be the peak of who he is, and I still think his game is pretty flawed, mostly in the lack of variety category. Shelton actually does have some variety, which I feel like is underrated. He has some pretty solid overall forehand, whether it involves topspin or power shots. The backhand's been fine. The serve's very good. He can also volley. Shelton's a pretty good player, and I feel like, once again, he's made some deep runs in Grand Slams before. Still very young. I think he can maybe one day get over the hump if you see Sinner or Alcaraz lose and the draw opens up. Maybe can make a deep run. I'm not saying another guy's going to win a Grand Slam, but I think Shelton is definitely on the verge of being, in my opinion, the second best American player. Fritz is there for consistency based on him being number 4 in the world. Do I think Shelton's better than Tommy Paul? There might be an argument. He's had more Grand Slam success than Paul, and he's still very young. So you can make the argument, but Shelton's definitely shown that he has a lot of stamina, a lot of overall mental toughness, and he's had a couple of marathon wins in this event. And yesterday, or this morning, was another example of that, as he was able to beat Sonego in 4. Looked like he was on the ropes a little bit after dropping the third set, but he eventually buckled down, and he got the job done there in 4. So nice win there for Shelton. Nice win for us there for the over. The match kind of played itself out the way that we thought it would. Moving on to the other matchup. You had Sinner against de Minaur. Damn, what an ass kicking. I got nothing else to add there. Sinner, I thought, would win, obviously. He owns de Minaur. However, I was concerned about the overall, I'd say, fitness of Sinner, who was struggling a bit physically in the match against Rune. And then you saw him absolutely show up and dominate the entire match. De Minaur won a grand total of 6 games. 6 games combined in 3 sets. Ass kicking. The match was over very quickly. Sinner looked great, and Sinner on hard court, when he's on, is the best player in the world. You can make an argument that Alcaraz has won back-to-back Wimbledons. It's very tough to beat on grass. You could argue that Alcaraz, who won the French Open, who ended up beating Sinner in the semis of that matchup, or in that tournament run, is great on his overall surface. The best player right now on any surface is Sinner on hard court. Sinner on hard court is just an absolute world beater. And if he plays like that and he's fully healthy, good luck, because he is going to destroy everybody. Now, Sinner, as an updated stat here, dating back to last year in the hard court swing, has won 22 straight matches. 22. So Sinner is once again on the warpath, and if healthy, Shelton might be up against it, because Sinner, I'll get into in a second, is minus 2,500 on the money line. So Sinner is definitely the guy to beat in the event. Props to Joker for beating Alcaraz. I'll preview that matchup in a second. Point is, though, if you're asking the best player on the best surface right now, it is easily Sinner on hard court. He's borderline unbeatable right now. And he tapped into that overall, I'd say, peak yesterday or this morning against de Minaur. And de Minaur should have not even shown up to the arena. So either way, a point is Alcaraz is now out. Sinner is still in. And we'll see if Sinner can coast to a title for the second straight year in the Australian Open. Now, getting into that matchup that I skipped over, I got to go back to it. It was the match of the round, arguably the match of the tournament. Yes, there were a couple 5-setters, but Djokovic-Alcaraz was very, very solid television. Now, Alcaraz had unforced error issues for the entire overall match. Now, I did like Joker to win, and I did like Joker to win and both players to win a set at plus 280, which got there. I'll admit, though, when Joker injured his groin in the first set, I may or may not have bet on Alcaraz in straight sets to kind of cover myself, and that ended up not working out. But Joker did win for the plus 280. Now, Alcaraz, I feel like one issue that he still runs into, I'm not sure how high his tennis IQ actually is, and I feel like his shot selection can be very, very underwhelming at times. Now, Joker, who is the best player of all time, you didn't need further proof of it, but beating Alcaraz, I think, is a good overall stamp on that if you wanted to make that argument. Point is, Joker, the one aspect of his game, which I think makes him the best of all time, is not the stamina, not the consistency. It's the overall mental toughness and tennis IQ. I think Djokovic is the smartest player to ever step foot on a tennis court. And I think that his overall problem-solving ability is the best of all time. It's why I think he's been so successful for so long. He can switch up styles mid-match when needed, whether it involves injury, whether it involves simple overall, match flow. He's not afraid of kind of scrapping the entire game plan, starting from scratch and trying to work his way to a win at any cost necessary. And he did that again against Alcaraz because he got injured late in that first set, hurt his groin, didn't look good. I know people are going to argue about a fake injury for Joker. I'm not going to agree with that. Joker was letting a lot of balls go by instead of actually running down some shots early on. So I actually think Joker was trying to save some energy and trying to not, I'd say, re-aggravate the injury he already suffered. I believe in the injury. Now, yes, I do think that he took enough drugs to kill a small horse in the middle of that first set in order to actually recover. And of course, Joker's known for his potions to heal, or I should say to feel less pain through pain-killing medication over the course of matches. But the point is, Joker, I think, was injured, and he decided after the first set, which he lost, you know what? I'm going to go for it. I'm too passive. Alcaraz is going to outlast me in these rallies. I have to force the issue. I have to be more aggressive, and I have to get Alcaraz on the back foot. And you know what? He did it. He dominated. He looked fantastic, and Joker was able to flip a switch to become uber aggressive, and it got him the win. So I was a big fan of watching Joker turn back the clock after struggling in the first two rounds against Basaveretti and against Faria. He's been great lately, and shout out to Murray, who's an undefeated coach in the Australian Open. With him, I don't know what Murray actually has done for him, but either way, point is Joker found a way to beat Alcaraz, and he was able to switch up styles midway after getting injured and having the overall, it's a mental IQ to switch playing styles to be ultra aggressive, and eventually that worked out in his favor. Now, I want to talk about Alcaraz for a second, because I do think it is a pretty rough loss for Alcaraz. Joker is kind of owning the head-to-head against Alcaraz, and yes, Alcaraz did win that Wimbledon final, which was a great win for him. Of course, the missed volley for Joker is going to be talked about for a while, but still, Joker has come back from that, beat him in Cincinnati, beat him in the Olympic gold medal, and beat him in the Australian Open. Joker's kind of owned him for the last year or two, and I kind of want to touch upon Alcaraz's overall legacy trajectory for a second. I know he's only 21. So before you end up criticizing me in the comment section saying I'm being harsh because Alcaraz is only 21 years old, he'll be an all-time great. I'm not saying that he's not going to be an all-time great. All I'm saying is if you put Alcaraz in the big three era with Djokovic, with Nadal, and Federer in their primes, I think Alcaraz is Andy Murray. That's where I'm at. I think Alcaraz right now, yes, he can maybe find a certain gear in a couple years when Joker retires, and maybe him and Sinner will split all the Grand Slams like Nadal and Federer used to do before Djokovic ended up bursting onto the scene as a serious contender and eventual GOAT. The point is, Alcaraz, I just think watching him play is not big three caliber. That's fine. The big three are all-time great players in any sport. They dominated the entire sport for about a decade plus. Joker's still doing it. The point is, Alcaraz, I do think, has a lot of hype behind him, rightfully so, as he's been successful. But if you're asking me right now, watching him, watching Federer, watching Nadal, and watching Djokovic, all in their primes, Alcaraz is fourth. There's nothing wrong with that. He's fourth. But in a big three era, he is Andy Murray. That's what a big three era, he's Andy Murray. That's my point. Joker proves time and time again he has mental toughness. Alcaraz, though, either with frustration, stubbornness, or lack of tennis IQ, was just letting Joker get the kick serve out wide in every big point for about the first three sets. I don't understand why there wasn't a single adjustment being made. Then Joker eventually had to serve it to the middle a bit, and eventually his first serve percentage did dip. But Joker was so successful on the second serve compared to Alcaraz. Alcaraz, ton of firepower, can't really hit a second serve, which I find kind of weird. Not as bad as Zverev. Zverev had a couple of really bad double faulting issues over the years, but I do think Alcaraz's overall tennis IQ can be very underwhelming. He can make every shot you can possibly think of. The talent is there, but he was just letting Joker get every kick serve out wide to set up free 1-2 punches every single time. It was really just mind-numbing to watch, and I think Alcaraz should have made some adjustments, which has been an issue in the past. I think Alcaraz is a great overall tennis player, and Richie's saying he's behind Sinner right now. I don't think you're wrong. I think Sinner is probably ahead of Alcaraz right now, but Alcaraz does have more. Does he have more Grand Slam titles? Yes. Alcaraz has more Grand Slam titles, so that is why people would argue that Alcaraz is better. The point is, though, I think Alcaraz, the one area of his game, which I think he needs to improve upon, is just tennis IQ stuff. He's only 21, but when some things aren't working, and your opponent, in this case Djokovic, is serving every serve out wide to your forehand, maybe you want to change your return position. Maybe. Maybe you want to switch some things up to make life difficult for the opposition. Alcaraz really doesn't do it. He just stands in the same spot and hopes for different results, and it doesn't work. So yes, Alcaraz can get away with it against weaker competition and sometimes against great competition, but it really annoys me when you see guys with that much talent just not being able to make some simple adjustments. And that's kind of my thoughts on that matchup. Great job by Djokovic, though. He got the job done as he ended up winning in 4 sets. Anyway, apologies for the long, I'd say, dragged out quarterfinal recap, but there were a couple of big matches I wanted to mention, especially for legacy purposes when you get Djokovic against Alcaraz in the quarters. So either way, time to get into the 2 matchups for the semifinals. For that, though, I want to remind you once again, we are brought to you by DraftKings because DraftKings is the place to bet on touchdowns for the playoffs, the NFL playoffs. Reminder, you got title games coming up in each conference, AFC and NFC. And a reminder that DraftKings, DraftKings Sportsbook is the official sports betting partner of the NFL. So if you want to bet touchdowns, you can also do so by betting on DraftKings. A reminder, for your first bet, great promo going on DraftKings. If you bet $5, you can get $200 of bonus bets instantly. So once again, great deal. Betting $5, $200 of bonus bets. No questions asked. A reminder, though, when you do sign up for your new account, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code SGP. Code SGP for new customers. You get $200 bonus instantly when you bet just $5. Only in DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished recapping the quarterfinals, and now it's time to get into the 2 matchups for the actual show. Starting off with the first match on the card. For this one, we're going to go with the Sinner and Shelton match. Now, I believe the order of the matches has not been decided yet, but to be honest, everyone would rather watch the Joker-Zverev match, so I'll save that for last. No offense to Shelton and Sinner, but either way, I think we all know what the main event is for the semis. So getting into the Sinner and Shelton match. Damn, they're picking Shelton to get his ass kicked. A Sinner's minus 2,000 and change. He's around minus 2,500. Shelton is around 10-1. For the game spread, you have minus 6.5 for Shelton, plus 6.5 for Shelton. You have the over-under in game set at 33.5. Now, for the set spread, Sinner in straight sets is around minus 150. You have the over 2.5, the over 3.5 sets, at plus 130. For Shelton to win a set, you can find that at plus 130. Now, Sinner did actually lose the first meeting against Shelton. That was in Shanghai a couple years ago. In fact, I believe Shelton won that event. I think that was a 500 event, which Shelton ended up winning. However, that pissed Sinner off because Sinner's won every match since, and he's not dropped a set. So Sinner has won 4 straight matches against Shelton, 3 on hard court, and then he had the Wimbledon matchup last year, and Shelton did not win a single set in any of those 4 matches. Now, there has been a breaker in all 5 head-to-head meetings, so you are expecting at least one breaker in this matchup, but Sinner, we know, is the class of the entire tournament, and I think that you're looking at a money line, which looks insanely disrespectful, but you understand it because Sinner looked that good against de Minaur. If Sinner was struggling physically, like he was against Rune, then the price would be way too big, but Sinner looked dominant, and he looked basically in perfect health. So the question is, if Shelton can't even win a set against Sinner in 2 out of 3 set matches, how the hell is he going to win 3 sets out of 5? The answer is he's not. Shelton's not winning this matchup. Now, I think Shelton's been playing well, and I do think he's looked sharp in Australia. So you could argue that Shelton, if his serve is on, can maybe find an opening. If Sinner ends up getting injured again, then maybe Shelton can find a way to win a set. That's all he's going to get. If Shelton's going to do anything in this matchup, it's winning a set. That's a moral victory, as far as I'm concerned. Sinner's winning. Like, if Sinner, as long as he doesn't get seriously injured, he should win this probably in straight sets. Sinner is an absolute monster, especially on hard court. I think he is the best player in the world. He's won 22 straight matches. Yes, he did lose to Alcaraz on hard court a couple months ago. That's the last hard court match and the last match he lost in general. Sinner, when healthy, is an absolute world beater, and he actually can achieve all-time great status because once he ends up figuring out the grass and the clay, the hard courts are his, as far as I'm concerned right now. So Shelton has a great serve. He needs to serve very well. And yes, he's been very good with the rally tolerance. The issue, though, is that Sonego, at times in that match, was able to overpower Shelton. He came to the net a lot. He had a couple of volley winners, but it seemed like Sonego, at moments, found some openings and was able to get Shelton on the back foot. That's not where Shelton wants to be. Shelton wants to be aggressive. He wants to unload the forehand, and he also wants to come forward. That's the issue. The issue is that Sinner can constantly achieve aggression over the course of rallies, and it's controlled aggression because he's so accurate. Sinner can hit so many spots, and he can hit with so much power that it's really tough to actually get on the offensive against him. And Shelton's had some moments. He's gone to a couple breakers against him. But in reality, I think Sinner is just too good. And assuming that he's at full health, which he should be, because de Minaur destroyed Mickelson the round prior. So it wasn't like de Minaur was struggling physically and had some signs that he was fatiguing. De Minaur was fine entering the matchup. He just got his ass kicked by the best player in the world right now. And I feel like Sinner, if he continues that type of form, is just too good for Shelton to handle. Maybe get a breaker in there. That wouldn't shock me. But I think at the end of the day, Sinner wins comfortably, probably in straight sets. Shelton's also played a lot of tennis. That match against Sonego was roughly 4 hours. That could be really taking a lot out of his legs. We saw him running around a lot. He dove on the floor a couple times, a couple splits. Like, Shelton doesn't let any points go. Underrated court coverage, but a lot of stamina was burnt in that matchup. 4 sets against Sonego, basically 4 sets against Monfils, 3+ because Monfils retired. 4 sets against Musetti, that was a long one too. 4 sets against Busta. He's been on the court for a long time. Sinner, not so much. Sinner's only dropped 1 set in the entire, dropped 2 sets. 1 to Rune and 1 to Schoolcap, but he's been pretty, I'd say, dominant besides that. I think Sinner wins in straight sets. Maybe the under, 33.5 games. Yes, you could argue Shelton maybe for 1 set can find an opening, maybe, but I can't go against Sinner. Sinner's too good. And the argument would be if injury was a factor, but after the de Minaur matchup, I can't really assume he's injured anymore. So I think that might have been a one-off issue against Rune, but the returning game's been getting better for Sinner. The firepower's great. The serve's still great. I believe the Shelton break line is over under half a break of serve. They're giving Shelton no chance. So I'm going to go with Sinner. Minus 2,500 feels a little bit disrespectful. I can understand that. I would have it at like minus 1,500. Does it really matter? No. You're still picking Sinner to win. Give me Sinner in straight sets. I just feel like at the end of the day, Sinner is too good, and I think there's a class differential here. Once again, Shelton can be top 10. I think Shelton's really good. He's also very young. But Sinner's just that guy right now, especially on hard court, and I want nothing to do with going against him. So I'm going to pass on that one. I see some people talking about the podcast. Thank you, Roby. I know you've been a fan of the show for a long time, so thank you for stopping by. I see Origami Master talking about Big Ben winning the whole thing. That would be a fun story. I'm not picking it, but I think Big Ben, once again, making a good run there is definitely good for American tennis. He's been a pretty consistent Grand Slam guy, something to keep in mind. But I see Richie mentioning he looked like a scrimmage. Really did. The truth is, if you watch the first I'd say the first 15 minutes of that matchup, you knew it was over. Like, I know you can argue that tennis can kind of turn on a dime sometimes with injuries, but that match was over very, very quickly. de Minaur offered nothing in terms of resistance, and Sinner was too good. So give me Sinner on that one in straight sets, and give me the under for this one as well for the first match. Moving on to the main event. You have Zverev against Djokovic. Now, Joker's favored at minus 155. You have Zverev at plus 135. For the spread, -2 for Joker, +2 for Zverev. The over in game is set at 40.5. For the set spread here, you have Joker -1.5 sets at plus 125. You have Zverev +1.5 sets at minus 155. And the over 3.5 sets is set at around -215 or 240. Once again, shopping around trying to find the best one. You can find 215. Joker in straight sets, by the way, to mention it, is around plus 325. Zverev in straight sets is plus 550. Zverev -1.5 sets is plus 240. Match to go 5 sets is 2-1. Now, for this one, the question is Joker, who just beat Alcaraz as a dog, should he be -150 or -160 against Zverev? First glance, bit expensive. I'll put it that way. I think Joker should be favored. I would go -135. 155 is kind of getting up there. That feels kind of disrespectful to Zverev, who's had some success against Joker in the past. I'm not saying that Joker's going to lose the match, but I think that 155 is a bit high for a guy that's had some injury issues over the course of the event. Now, Zverev, we know, beat Paul in 4 sets. Could have lost the match, but hey, he did his part. He ended up winning that one in 4. So he ended up winning that one in 4. And besides that, he's been dominant because Zverev won in 4 against Doombear, and that's the only 2 sets he's dropped. So he's been very good in the event. Now, he had the biceps injury before the tournament, but that appeared to be over-exaggerated as he was completely healthy, as far as I'm concerned, as he ended up winning the first 3 matches in straight sets. For Joker, he dropped the first, I'd say he dropped the set in each of the first 2 rounds to Balsaveretti and Faria. Then he beat Makic in straight sets, beat Leheshka in straight sets, and beat Alcaraz in 4. Once again, a reminder of an important gambling lesson. Try to learn from your previous losses instead of getting mad about Joker beating Makic in straight sets when we had the over. Instead, we learned from it. We said Joker was back in his old form and thought he would beat Makic in straight. We thought he'd end up beating Leheshka in straight sets, and he'd end up beating Alcaraz. So we sacrificed basically a minus 120 loss or so on the over a couple rounds ago to win a plus money play on straight sets against Leheshka and a plus 280 against Alcaraz. So once again, just because you lose a bet, don't automatically get mad and try not to learn from your mistakes. Try to, I'd say, figure out some logical conclusions from what happened and try to apply it to later matches. And we did. We basically traded 1 loss for 2 wins, maybe 3, depending on how this matchup goes. But once again, an important gambling advice. Try to keep in mind when you lose, don't just only chalk it up to bad luck or to one guy being terrible. Try to figure out maybe one takeaway that you can apply to future matches that can get you some money. And we did that, and that worked out in our favor for the next 2 rounds. Before this matchup, Joker in the head-to-head has been good against Zverev. Now, Joker in the head-to-head, to get into some details here, is currently 7-3. Now, they faced off in Cincinnati, 2023, last meeting on hard court, and Joker did win that one in straight sets. Faced off in the World Tennis League 2022, Zverev did win that one in straight sets. ATP Finals in 2021, Zverev did beat Joker in 3. US Open 2021, you saw Joker win that one in 5. Olympics in 2021, Zverev did win in 3. Australian Open in 2021, Joker did win in 4. So going through the last couple of meetings, Zverev's actually 3-2 in the last 5 head-to-head meetings, but they're all dated as they were in 2023 or mostly 2022 and 2021. Now, Joker, we said before, has found a certain gear that we were waiting for, and it seems like Joker is all the way back. Now, I am still concerned about the groin, and I do wonder if that'll impact him in a longer match or if he'll punt the set maybe. But Zverev, I think, looked pretty shaky against Paul, and now we know Zverev is going to be really up against it. The crowd should be fully in favor of Joker, I just imagine, because after what happened in that Alcaraz match, I think the fan base will be pretty strongly in favor of Joker, who's won the event 10 times, and he ended up having the Australian broadcaster call him overrated, and that was a whole separate thing. But I think the crowd will mostly favor Joker, who does not have much time left in his prime. At least we think he's not going to. But either way, I think that Zverev is going to put up a fight. Will he win? No. I'm going to go Joker in this one. I think Joker is just built better mentally to handle the big moments. We saw Zverev lose last year in the semis, up 2-0 as Medvedev. He ended up losing the next 3 sets. He's a choker. It is what it is. Now, he does make the semis and beyond, so he does make it further than other chokers. But against top-tier competition, besides Alcaraz, honestly, but Alcaraz, even in the French Open, he did lose that in the final. The point is, Zverev, when push comes to shove, you assume will fold more often than he rises to the actual occasion. So give me Joker, who I think mentally will eventually wear Zverev down. If things go poorly for Zverev, he will implode. It's going to happen. I don't see Zverev putting together a phenomenal comeback effort if that's what it comes to. Give me Joker to win, but minus 155, really not a great price. I'll go back to the bread and butter for the tournament so far. Give me one player to win and both players to win a set. Joker to win with both players to win a set. Plus 164 on FanDuel. Great price. I think it's a phenomenal price. Zverev's been competitive in a lot of these head-to-head matchups, win or lose, even in Grand Slams. He tends to lose in 4 or 5. I see a potential heartbreaking loss for Zverev, but I think Joker eventually will get the job done. Give me Joker. If you wanted the actual breakdown of the 2 semifinal matchups based on sets, give me Sinner in 3. Give me Joker in... You know what? I'll go Joker in 5 for this one. Thought about 4. I'll be a bit different. Give me Joker in 5 for this matchup. I think it'll be close, though. There's a reason why the over 3.5 sets is around minus 240. I think you're going to see a close matchup that Joker does eventually win by wearing down Zverev over the course of about 3-4 hours. That'll be my thoughts for that match. That's going to wrap it up for the extra preview of the two semifinal matchups here in the Australian Open. Now it's time for the lock and dog pick. For that, though, I want to remember once again, they're brought to you by Nordic Fans because they have a lot of good items in the pick menu. They have a lot of easy ways to win also with profit boosting, give me pick'ems, NFL, college basketball, MMA, NBA, NASCAR, and tennis. A lot of other sports too, esports too, if you care about that. You can also put entries there with esports. You can also use boosts and specials on all your flex entries. For my upcoming entry, give me Josh Allen higher on his rush attempts here against the Chiefs. Coming up on Sunday, think he'll be running a lot. He's the short yardage back for the Bills. He does QB sneak stuff, and I think that they will put the ball in his hands because he's a borderline MVP winner. So you're looking at him being the main guy. I think he'll get the ball, and I think he'll be able to run a couple times in this game. So give me the higher on his rush attempts here. Not to mention Buffalo kneel downs potentially if they win the game. So keep that in mind. A reminder, though, when you do sign up for your new account, use the promo code SGPN to claim a special pick and a first-time deposit offer up to 1K bonus cash on a fantasy promo code SGPN. We're also brought to you by Rhythm. A reminder that Rhythm can help you build betting models if you're interested in doing so. You can also do it in a couple of ways. You can build your own model, copy one from the leaderboard, or let Rhythm build one for you. So if you want to try actual predictive models and let Rhythm be your first trial run, and you can also try it out for free because they have a week free trial. And a reminder, they also have NFL picks, NFL props, college basketball, and NBA. Rhythm has it all for you. A reminder, though, try it out for free for a week using the link, sportscam.com's Rhythm, sportscam.com's RITHMM. Welcome back, everyone, to the Tennis Game Podcast. Just finished previewing the semifinal matchups here in the Australian Open on the men's side. Now it's time for the lock and dog picks. First of all, Michael, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully you enjoyed the show. Starting off with the actual lock, I am going to go back to the Sinner match against Shelton. Thought about going for the under in games, but Shelton has forced a couple breakers against Sinner in the past, and I think you might end up getting a couple competitive sets here. I'm going to go with Sinner to win in straight sets. Not going to reinvent the wheel here. Give me Sinner 3-0 at minus 150. Now, Sinner looked amazing against de Minaur in the quarters. It was an absolute bloodbath. It was an ass-kicking, and I feel like de Minaur, once again, was basically helpless over the course of those three sets. He had no chance. So Sinner was struggling physically a little bit against Rune. He picked it up after the match timeout, the controversial match timeout mid-set. Then he won the next couple sets as he won in 4. He definitely looked fully healthy. So it seemed like the Rune issue was more of a stomach thing, and it appears that physically he's fine. So if Sinner's going to look that good again, Shelton's screwed. Like, no way around it. But Sinner's won 22 straight matches. He is unbeatable right now on hard court, and I feel like Shelton, despite having a great tournament so far, has played a lot of tennis. He had a 4-hour marathon against Sonego, had a 4-set match against, once again, a couple of tough opponents too. Had a 4-set match that ended up lasting a while as well against or I should say, it was going to last a while against Monfils. He was pretty fortunate Monfils quit. Musetti was a long match too. That went to a 4th-set breaker. Busta wasn't easy either. Point is, Shelton's been on court for a long time compared to a Sinner. And I think Sinner just has been too dominant on hard court for me to go against him. Shelton maybe can find an opening in a breaker, maybe a break point chance or two, but Sinner's too good right now, and Sinner's also owned the head-to-head lately, as Sinner's won 9 straight sets against Shelton. He's won 4 straight matchups, all in straight sets. I'll go with history to repeat itself. I don't want to say it's as dominant as the Sinner de Minaur head-to-head, but when one guy just owns you and never drops any sets, why would I not take it to winning straight sets again, especially when you're the best player in the world, off of your best performance the entire event in the quarterfinals? I'll go with that. Minus 150 might seem a bit expensive to some. Not to me. I think it's a good price. Give me Sinner straight sets at minus 150. Once again, he's minus 2,500 on the money line. So the odds makers are giving Shelton basically a 0% chance of winning. If you want to give me a minus 150 opportunity to back a minus 2,500 favorite to win in straight sets, I'm going to do it. So give me Sinner once again in straight sets as my lock. For my dog, I am going to go back to that Joker and Zverev match I mentioned it a second ago. It has been one of my favorite props in the entire event. I'm going to go back to it. Give me Joker to win and both players to win a set at plus 164. I picked the match to go 5, maybe 4, but I do think it makes sense that the over 3.5 sets here is minus 215, minus 220, or minus even 240 in some spots. I think it's a great price. Joker, though, has lost at least 1 set in 4 of his last 6, dropped a set to Bosvaretti, dropped a set to Faria, and then dropped a set to Alcaraz there in the first set in the quarters. He's still a bit injured, so maybe it acts up on him, and maybe he ends up falling behind a break or so in a set. Joker, though, I think is not 100% healthy. Think he'll be drugged at some point during the matchup to not feel the pain. But I think you're looking at Joker, who maybe will struggle physically for one set, and Zverev can capitalize on it. But the price is still pretty solid for the over 3.5 sets. Joker's favored. It's a good way to reduce minus 155 into getting plus money for getting a tennis favorite. And on top of that, Zverev's been good in the head-to-head. He has not won many matches outright in terms of their overall careers, but I'll point out that Zverev has won at least one set in 6 of the last 7 head-to-head meetings. So when Joker does win, it tends to go long, and he tends to outlast him in a marathon. Give me that once again. I'll go Joker in 5, but I do think that Zverev winning at least one set in 6 of the last 7 meetings does tell me Zverev will leave this match with something, and that the over 3.5 sets at minus 215 is a worthy price. Give me Joker to win, but in 4 or 5 at plus money. So once again, the plays here for the lock and dog pick. The lock's going to be on Sinner in straight sets at minus 150. For the dog, I am going to go with Joker to win and both players to win a set at plus 164 on FanDuel. That's going to wrap it up. A reminder, we already did the women's episode for the semis earlier this morning. So if you want to check out that episode, check out that one for a bonus lock and dog. Go back once again for the women's final in a couple days. So don't forget about that. And until next time, find me on Twitter at Reichel Radio. Find me on the NBA show. Find me on the MLB show. Find me on the WNBA show as well. Don't forget to check out the merch store as well. Promo code Big Game, 15% off everything in the merch store. For the comment section, looking quickly, did I see Ben's comments on Channel 9 this tournament? Which comments are you talking about? Are you talking about the actual interview questions where he roasted the on-court interview guys? Which comments are you referring to? Origami. I did see those comments. I didn't talk about it, though, where he kind of roasted all the courtside reporters for asking the dumbest questions imaginable. Good for Shelton. I like kind of what he had to say. I didn't really talk about it, but I think you're looking at the spot where Shelton, I think, isn't wrong. I thought that first of all, the Joker situation, the reporter's an idiot. Like, if you want to taunt Serbian fans who paid money, one, to go to the event, B, to arguably fly to Australia, and you want to taunt the fans behind you, I just think you're an absolute clown. The interviews, I agree with his overall comments. Even the TN interview after he beat Medvedev, I thought was very weird because they clearly didn't know anything about him. They were just like, oh, we didn't think you'd win. How do you feel about it? And they just talked to him about it. And you're like, yeah, you were clearly not prepared to talk to the guy. I think Shelton's right. There have been some pretty weird interviews going on, and maybe that's just tennis coverage in general. A lot of overall news outlets kind of focus a lot on the negatives instead of the positives, instead of trying to actually grow the sport. I'll put it this way. I think that Shelton had a very good point, and I think he articulated it pretty well. So I agree with Shelton. Now, I'm not a reporter. Instead, I talk about gambling purposes, but I feel like I try to promote the game in a positive light more often than not. Except when a player, chokes or has some overall spots where I can roast them for it. But it's about balance for me. I try to mix the yin and the yang. I try to be positive and negative towards certain players, especially when they're deserving either way. But I agree with Shelton. I think his comments were definitely fair. And I feel like tennis coverage needs to improve in that area instead of focusing a lot on the negatives, or even like McEnroe in the booth, especially in early rounds, who knows nothing about these guys. Like, you're watching the TN match, you're watching some of these other guys trying to pull off upsets like School Cat, for example, and you know that McEnroe has never heard of either guy in his entire life. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you've noticed that too, where he just has no clue, like, what is happening with this other guy. Korda is one guy. Felix can be another guy. There are some guys who just choke all the time. So at least I acknowledge it, and I try to warn other people about their flaws. However, you can still make it out of the doghouse. Dimitrov did, because Dimitrov won a title and he ended up winning once again a bunch of matches, made it into the top 10. I used to roast Dimitrov for years on this show because he never won a damn thing. And then he finally won. So I stopped talking about him. Or at least I stopped roasting him because he actually won something. You can get out of it. Korda, though, won a 500 last year. But I feel like he thinks he's better than he actually is. And I kind of have to knock him down a peg or two. So that's kind of where I'm at for Korda and for Felix and some of the other guys. But for the most part, I try to be positive. But I feel like Shelton's right. They do need to do a better job when it comes to overall interview prep for these players. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up, though, for the actual episode. Until next time, good luck to all of you and all of your bets. Bye, everyone.